Hello and welcome back to Inside Update. This is a show brought to you by InsideInvestigator.org. We're a nonprofit newsroom where we use the power of investigative journalism to root out corruption. Specifically, we're focused on the state of Connecticut, where unfortunately we are very busy. There is certainly no shortage of work to be done. And today, my name is Connor Dragotis. I'm the managing editor, and I'm joined by Alex Appel, investigative reporter. Alex, how you doing today?
Doing well. I'm doing well. How are you?
Fantastic. Truly, it is way too warm out, so I'll complain about that, but only with like the good-spirited nature of I would also complain, I guess, about the cold. Except I feel like I don't mind a nice wood fire. So give me the winter any day, I suppose.
My issue is I feel like we skipped spring. So it just went from like 50s to 80s, at least where I'm at.
It's so true. Yeah, all of a sudden it was like allergy season was just like that was spring. It was just 2 weeks of brutal allergies for folks, and then immediately right into the dog days of summer. It is, yeah, quite warm. On the other hand, though, hopefully folks out there are enjoying the weather in some ways. Getting out, a lot of opportunities to be on the water or otherwise get outside. It's baseball season. I don't know. We got to be excited about some positive silver lining here, especially because some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is not exactly the brightest topics. Maybe we could talk about this to start, which is just we got a comment on one of our stories, which was, can't you write about something positive? Which I'm so sympathetic toward, right? Like in our practice guide, one of the items is literally have fun, because we want to have this true heart for what we do, but at the same time, we just can't write about fluff news, right?
The issue with corruption is there's rarely a very happy side to it. There's sometimes really entertaining sides. I'm not going to say that's not a part of it, but I know occasionally we do stories about like, okay, what's going right? But yeah, I think it's just kind of the nature of the beast. I don't want to say we never do that, but it's just kind of not our thing.
Yeah. Well, I like it when we can write stories and publish them that have, hey, here was, corruption in the past tense. We want to write about it because it's now over. And, look at this person who now has all their problems fixed and they're living a wonderful life. Like those stories do happen. So I guess maybe this is just a call for, hey, if you've experienced something or your life is better, but you know that there's a situation that could arise for someone else, that's a great tip to send, right? Like we love telling happy stories. And, that comments are what I wrote back, and I said much the same, just letting them know, like, please, like, let's have an ongoing conversation about this, because you're right. We do have to write about the bummer stuff. That's part of the mission, right? This is not just a general newsroom. We're not just out here to drive clicks and try to collect ad revenue like so many news outlets do. We don't even run ads. We don't have paywalls. We're donor-supported nonprofit newsroom with a specific mission to root out corruption. So that does tailor kind of what we're doing here. And I guess that's my lead into your latest investigation, which is about juveniles in detention facilities for months. And some of what's going on with that, of course, not just that it's happening, but some of the different ways that people are attempting to push back, I guess, and fix this. I think we've also seen, and maybe we could get into this as well as we get into the conversation, we've had some people who have said this isn't even a problem, which I think was an interesting narrative, not what I expected in the comments. But before we get there, tell us a little bit about extended hold, this investigation. What are we actually talking about here?
Yeah, so just for a bit of a background, and Connecticut's not unique in this, we have a goal to minimize the amount of time that juveniles accused of crimes who have been arrested are in any form of detention facility. It also works on the other end. Once a juvenile has been found guilty of something, we want to minimize that. Now, Connecticut has actually led the nation in a lot of reforms in reducing the overall number of juveniles who are put into detention, either pre or post disposition. But we still have this one area that really stands out, and it is the number of kids, I guess technically is an age connotation, so we'll say minors,
Sure.
that are in, extended holds. They're in detention facilities for lengthy periods of time, longer than 50, 60 days. And, you know, I'm an adult. If I have to do something I don't like for 60 days, it sucks. But it doesn't have, I mean, if I had to be in a detention facility for 60 days, that's not the type of normal, unpleasant thing I do.
Sure.
But when you're looking at younger people, these have, in some situations, lifelong consequential impacts. And so this piece is kind of looking at why has the number of juveniles in detention predisposition, so they haven't been found guilty of anything, increasing, or at least not decreasing, while pretty much by every other metric, Connecticut is succeeding in its goals to reduce juvenile detentions.
I'm glad to hear you talk about, or to mention that, the age category and I mean, ultimately, I guess that is the goal, hypothetically, of all justice systems, is to improve outcomes, decrease recidivism, ultimately decrease the crime, the initiation of violence, the diminishment of wealth by force or fraud, whatever is going wrong. You just want to decrease the instances of those. Whether or not it's actually happening is way more than we're going to get into in a half-hour discussion here. But the goal here, and we opened this investigation by saying that Connecticut officials are often pretty happy with what's going on in juvenile justice systems, and even I think the justice system generally. There's been a lot of movement in the last decade for Connecticut to make changes. So this is one area, though, that officials have been pretty vocal about. Is it because that it's just, hey, this is kind of what we have left to deal with, or is this one that folks seem to think is just, of those things that are left to deal with, this one feels manageable?
So I guess whenever you talk about the Justice Department, there's always two sides. There's the rehabilitation side. There's how you help offenders or accused offenders move past transgressions. And then there is also the victim side. And so I think on the rehabilitation side, this is definitely something where it's one of the few things left we have. On the victim side, that's a whole other thing. I read another story about car theft arrests, but that's a different conversation. So I think, though, but the reason I mention it is because that's also a very vocal conversation, right? So there are vocal debates happening on both sides. Also, I mean, Brandon has written about accelerated rehabilitation.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of good work on that front. But yeah, in terms of minors specifically, I think this, and then the idea of lengthy sentences for people who are found guilty of very serious crimes when they were younger, are really the two conversations I'm hearing the most about.
When we talk about corruption, I think one of the most interesting things over the now 4.5 years or so since we've started Inside Investigator and been working on this is the amount of opportunity that we've had to forge upstream. Obviously, Catherine has done extensive transparency work, meaning like if things are not transparent, it's harder to expose corruption, right? But also to what you're talking about here, where if we are talking about the justice system, you're right. Brandon has found a lot of inroads in that upstream situation. Catherine's written about the plea bargaining crisis. You're taking a look at kind of, I guess, maybe even some of the downstream stuff is the way that I'll describe it here. But like, once something has gone wrong, what the heck are we going to do about it? And I'm very appreciative of that balance that's being struck, at least in our newsroom, to provide that comprehensive picture, even if it is over dozens of stories or a handful of really impactful investigations. Obviously, we are not the only ones who are taking a look at this, though. The media plays an important role in translating a lot of this, especially because I think most people don't want to read the legalese, whether that's lawsuits or, frankly, the laws, right? The laws are written in a way that most people do not find easy to understand. But there is a legislative angle here for how this is being tackled. Could you talk a little bit about that and help clear the air so folks don't have to go read those complicated documents?
Yeah. So when we're talking specifically about juvenile delinquency, And I should note there's kind of two types of crimes I'm talking about. There's the crimes that automatically default to adult court, and then there's the rest.
Okay.
That's how I'm going to categorize them. I'm sure other people can come up with other ways. But when we're talking about the legislative efforts, you have to understand that this didn't start in 2024 or 2025 or 2026. This started a long time ago in Connecticut. It started with changing the ages in which, basically making it so for certain crimes, there are tiers to it, right? Like there are, if you're 16, 17 and you commit these crimes, you might be held to a higher standard than if you're 14, 15, and a different standard for younger. So there's a lot of components that go into this. The first one is kind of determining that age in which, I'm trying to phrase this delicately, in which you can kind of be fully held accountable. It's this idea that when you're young, you don't really understand all of the things you're doing. And that is a conversation that's actually still going on. So while we've been having these efforts, at first they were targeted at minors and when to delineate and like how bad is a car theft, and should someone who is accused of stealing a car be treated in the same way as someone who's accused of killing someone, either through manslaughter and murder in the pre-detention facilities where you try that, or predisposition detention system. Oy vey. Try saying that 5 times fast. So there's that. And now we're kind of looking at lengthy sentences for people even going into their 20s. Now, the man I spoke to, kind of the primary source, Cameron Atkinson's, he proposes a wholly different legislative idea, and that is trying to change things in basically integrating more trials, right? So when you're looking at many crimes in juvenile court, really the question is, you're determined not so much like in adult court, there are degrees. In juvenile court, it's mostly like, are you guilty? Are you not guilty? If you're guilty, okay, what do we go from there? But it's not as tiered. And so he's saying that, because there's a more simplistic justice system, like yes, no, doesn't mean that you have to avoid a jury trial altogether. And so he believes that if you give people, he believes that there's this issue where a lot of minors and a lot of their parents are feeling pressured into just saying, okay, he did it, she did it, just to move forward with the system. And now he's saying like, no, let's move back to a trial, because then we're going to find not only did a lot less people do these crimes they're accused of, you don't have to, Connecticut's very good at clearing records, but you don't have to be punished for something you didn't do just to move forward with the process. So yeah, there's in terms of legislative components, there's a long history there, but then there's these ideas for how to further reform the system in different ways to integrate more trials.
So Connecticut also seems to be in, I think, a period of transition, even again, just in the last 4 years since we've been in business writing about corruption in the state, where it is not totally clear what it means to be an adult. Like there have been a number of situations. I think we've done reporting on this too, where being eligible for parole based on, that age has crept up from 18 to 21. Proposals are 25, and a lot of that has to do with advancements or changes in the understanding of how the human brain develops. But ultimately, it seems like to a certain extent that also falls on deaf ears, rightly or wrongly. I'm not making a judgment here, but that does seem to be part of it, right? It's just, are you responsible for your actions? Regardless, though, there is still a victim. There has been harm done. There has been a wrong. So again, it's I guess just the battleground seems to be over what is best for the long-term health of the community moving forward. And I do get the feeling too, not to overcomplicate this comment, but there's a big difference between what people seem to believe is the right thing for Connecticut versus what is the right thing for my community, those within a 10-mile radius of me, right? Like that's a problem when you don't feel like you're being heard, because Harvard is just not the same as Southington. I'm sorry, it's a different world, and the law doesn't always seem to accommodate for that. This one size fits all thing is causing some of this butting of heads. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. I always get a little wary when we talk about ages too. I mean, because 18 isn't, I mean, you could say it's arbitrary or not. It's also when people start to vote.
Sure. Yeah. If you want the voice,
Yeah.
there's a couple of great books about what it means to be a citizen that we could talk about. One of our commenters here, again, if you're tuning in for this and you're listening on the radio, these shows are live, and you can actually write in and ask questions and talk about these topics. Peter writes in just saying that the state struggles with the concept that children are children and adults are adults. He makes the argument that children become adults at the age of 18, not sooner, not later. It's 18, I guess, partially because of the same sort of stuff you're talking about, right? When you step into those things. But it is, I also, Peter, I'll push back a little bit. It seems to be a graded system. There's driver's licenses, there's drinking ages, there's military service, there's voting, and then there's just the ability to be responsible for your own actions, which is something that I don't think law is ever going to be able to fully accommodate for, right? Like, the number is different than the thing. And Alex, as you have looked into this, because this is not the only investigation or article you've written that touches on this topic, is that a kind of a fair characterization that this is kind of an eternal gray area, or do you see some sort of end point for this debate?
I kind of agree with, I think this is one of those human nature debates that's going to be going on forever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and like, what is the big difference between someone who's 18 versus someone who's a week away from being 18?
Yes.
Right? Like,
you got to draw the line somewhere, but no matter what, there's going to be the outlier situation that feels vastly unfair to someone, whether it's the victim or the perpetrator, or, it's just there. And let alone the other thing here that I think we could talk about too, and I know that we had mentioned this kind of off air. Could you talk a little bit about the underlying issue of, I guess, like drug abuse and addiction as well? And I think that I'll throw out there, before you answer that, I'll give you a moment to collect your thoughts. But Brandon has also done some exceptional work here about, the disabled and those who are even, they're 25, 30, 80 years old, but they just don't have the ability to fully understand what they're doing. So I guess talk about the drug issue though, and we can go from there.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to understand is when you're talking about people being detained for extended periods of time, predisposition, maybe I'll just say, when I'm talking about this story in general, just assume it's predisposition. So I don't have to repeat that phrase I am having a lot of trouble saying for some reason today. It's often not the crime that's keeping them, the crime they are accused of, that's keeping them in detention facilities. It's them not being able to abide by the conditions of parole. And one of the biggest driving factors of that is drug use, which in itself is often driven by addiction. Now, there's a lot of debate if detention is actually going to make that problem better or worse. The man I spoke to said it was kind of a 50-50 situation. Half the people go there, they get sober, it's good. The other half, they meet other drug dealers. So the punishments we are looking, I say punishments, but like the punishment isn't strictly to the accused crime. It's for other behavioral and lifestyle choices that are done around it. And that's, using fentanyl, having possession of fentanyl is illegal no matter what, period. But when you're in this juvenile system, I mean, if you're an adult and you're on parole, you also can't use these drugs. I think those are always going to be a violation of the conditions of probation. But when you're talking about, okay, what policies can we do to reduce the number of juveniles in detention for long periods of time, that's not always criminal justice policies. That can also be, how do you fight addiction? How do you fight the sale of drugs? What resources do you offer? What kind of social programs do you offer to try and, disincentivize people from using drugs, some sort of social alternatives? So
we also have a really, the justice system is a busy place because they are tasked with dealing. I mean, what's the congressional joke? Hey, could you put together a list? I think this was 2011 or 2013. They were tasked with putting together a list of all federal crimes, and they came back and they said, "There's too many. We can't do it. It's not a thing." I think that's part of the problem as well, is when you have a set number of people responsible for such a vast number of differing situations, you either over specify, and that comes with its own set of problems, or the job just gets too big. So maybe narrowing it down too to what kind of corruption, what kind of issues you actually want to tackle. That seems like part of this.
Yeah. And it's a whole other conversation. And that's one Connecticut has often. What should be handled by the Justice Department versus what should be handled by the Department of Social Services?
For sure. I really appreciate your work on this. I know that you have a lot more fun investigations coming out in the next couple of months here. Alex has done a great job putting together a pipeline of stuff that, a couple 1-2 punches coming your way, folks. So please be sure that you are subscribed to our always free emails at insideinvestigator.org. This latest work, though, is called Extended Hold: Juveniles in Detention Facilities for Months and the Alternatives Being Explored. In that, you'll see the data. There's a lot more from Attorney Atkinson, more about the legislative process, more about some of the underlying issues as well. It's a great piece. Go check that out. And in our last couple minutes here, about 8 minutes left that we have in this show, we're going to switch over to immigration. And this is another topic that you have done continuing work on. We don't really have beats in our newsroom, but what we do have that is baked into our business strategy is that our reporters are encouraged to pursue things that are impactful and personally interesting, right? I believe that reflects in the quality of work. If you're not getting stories that you hate to write about, which, call me crazy, but I think that that's an important part of our success and what's allowed our brand to resonate with people. This news story came out 2 days ago. Basically talks about continued conflicts with ICE after the raid in Danbury. Just talk to us about what's going on with immigration in Connecticut, and then I definitely have a few follow-up questions for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing to keep in mind is when you think of immigration, Connecticut's not really the first state that comes to mind. We aren't a border state. We do have an airport, but that's not really a major hub of transportation. We do have an agricultural industry, but we don't have a giant one.
Yep.
So that being said, there are immigrants, a lot of them in our state, and a portion of them are legal immigrants. So this is kind of one of those issues that I don't want to say doesn't impact Connecticut directly, because it impacts a lot of people. But it's also a national political flashpoint. And a lot of what happens here is happening in the context of other things happening in the nation and in the Northeast. What happened a few days in Danbury is there was an immigration raid right outside the courthouse. And it was just very new and different. It was very, I don't want to say bizarre, but ICE agents had cameras with them. In the past, when I've reported on this issue, ICE agents were like in unmarked cars, allegedly kind of observing from the back, and then they'd go in, make their arrests, and leave. But here they had cameras. And so there's this ongoing the Department of Justice has sued our state over our Trust Act. And so it just seems like there's almost a shift, from my perspective, where ICE was kind of operating in secret, afraid of being, agents were afraid of having their identities be spread across the internet, being harassed. And the debates over the actions still continue. But the way that they're approaching it, at least in this one instance, is very, very new. Right?
It's so interesting. Yeah. And to your point about the focus there too, and obviously Connecticut not being a border state, I do think that there's been a tremendous amount of pressure from state legislators, certainly, but also the federal contingent is very vocal on this issue, right? There's a cultural movement in Connecticut. Obviously, this is a uniparty state that is not politically aligned with the federal administration right now. So you get this natural butting of heads, but you also, I do think Connecticut officials, government officials, have been inviting these fights. Certainly, Attorney General Tong is no stranger to the courtroom and fighting back. I think he might hold the record for most lawsuits filed against the Trump administration. So, I mean, Connecticut is not stepping away from this in the slightest. If anything, it seems that officials are trying to make a statement and be more part of this conversation. Do you think that that's fair for me to say, or maybe I'm just not watching the news in other states?
I don't know what the difference is. I don't think Tong is actually filing that many lawsuits on his own. I think he is joining in on multi-state lawsuits.
Okay. Yep.
And I think that matters because it really shows the national side of this. And this isn't just with immigration. He does this a lot. But a lot of these immigration questions are going to be determined in courts. They're going to move their way up courts as well. So right now, the Supreme Court is, I feel like every other day we're told, like, they're going to make a ruling on birthright citizenship, but that will happen eventually.
Yes.
I'm going to say this and then it's going to happen this afternoon. That's my guess. But at the end of the day, a lot of these decisions are going to be made in district courts. And Connecticut is trying to, again, I don't want to say insert itself, because for illegal immigrants, for people who live with their communities, for their families, this is a very much a local issue. But yeah, like, Connecticut is trying to have a stake in the national conversation. And we're doing this in interesting ways, right? And one of them is joining all of these interstate lawsuits.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
No shortage of resources being thrown at that.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's just one of those, I know why it is such a focus from a national perspective. It's just interesting to see the state kind of throw its weight so much behind it. Again, to people, like, this is a very much a local issue to everyone it impacts, but there's just, we all know how it works.
Well, I certainly expect that we will have more coverage of immigration issues moving forward. There will likely be more lawsuits. I have no doubt there will be more flashpoints and frustrations. Before we wrap up here, anything else that you want to throw in about the future of immigration in Connecticut? Anything else that people should be keeping their eyes out for, or also just other topics that you want people paying attention to send you tips for future stories?
I don't think we should lose sight of the federal challenge to our Trust Act. I don't think we should forget about that. The Trust Act basically prevents any sort of state official from working with immigration agents to deport anyone unless they have been found guilty of a Class A or B felony. Now, I think it's worth noting the difference between a Class C and a Class B felony isn't as big as many people would realize.
Okay.
So there's a lot that's also a criminal justice thing too. If you take a plea bargain for a Class A felony, you're charged with the Class C, whatever. There's a lot of things there, but don't lose sight of that, because if we were to lose that, if it is eventually determined, it might not be, that our Trust Act is unconstitutional, I think we're going to find Connecticut doesn't really keep track of illegal immigrants, and that's an intentional choice. I think we're going to find a lot more about our state if that gets struck down. I think we're going to find out a lot more stuff that has been intentionally obscured, and maybe for good reason, depending on your view. But there's a lot of unknowns, and those unknowns are often generalized by one side or another to kind of shape this conversation.
Here we are sitting in the middle as journalists.
Yes. we don't take a side. It's Alex,
thank you. I truly appreciate your work continuing to cover these important issues criminal justice, probate, and all of those issues, everything with immigration. Some really unique stuff Alex has been digging into, folks. Head over to insideinvestigator.org. You can click on her name, and if you do, it'll give you a list of everything she's ever written. We also have a new and improved search tool on our website that allows you to filter, read stuff by Alex, read stuff by Mark, Catherine, Brandon, just a better way to filter through to get the content that you want. As always, I'll throw out my plea for support. We are a nonprofit that is 100% donor supported, which frees us up from the perennial problems that so many news organizations have. And it also makes us so appreciative of all of those who help make this life-changing work possible. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Inside Update. And until then, folks, please don't be corrupt.